Only one tunnel remained. Only one tunnel, and the goal given to him by Hunter towards which Artyom stubbornly and recklessly went would be reached. There were 2, maybe 3 kilometers left to go along a dry and quiet section, and he'd be there. An echoing silence prevailed in Artyom's head, a silence almost like that in the tunnel, but he no longer asked questions of himself. In another 40 minutes he'd be there. 40 minutes, and his trek would be over. He wasn't even aware that he was walking in impenetrable darkness. His legs continued to steadily mark off the ties. It was as if he had forgotten about all the dangers that threatened him, that he was unarmed, and that he had no identity papers, no flashlight, and no weapons, that he was dressed in an odd-looking set of loose overalls, and that finally he knew nothing about either this tunnel or the dangers that lay in wait for travelers through it. His conviction that nothing posed a threat to him as long as he was following his path filled him. Where had the seemingly inescapable fear of the tunnels gone? What had happened to his fatigue and lack of faith? The echo spoiled everything. Because this tunnel was so empty, the sound of his steps, carried both ahead and behind. Reflected from the walls, they rumbled and gradually receded and passed into a rustle, and then echoed shortly after, so that it seemed Artyom was not walking in the tunnel alone. After some time, this perception became so acute that Artyom wanted to stop and listen, and find out if the echo of his steps had a life of its own. He continued to struggle with temptation for several minutes. His pace became slower and quieter, and he listened to hear if this affected the loudness of the echo. Finally, Artyom stopped completely. He stood like that in the impenetrable darkness and waited, afraid to take a deep breath lest the sound of air entering his lungs interfered with the perception of the slightest murmurs in the distance. Silence. Now that he had stopped moving, his perception of the reality of space again vanished. While he was walking, it was as if he was grasping that reality by the soles of his boots. When he stopped in the middle of the ink-black darkness of the tunnel, Artyom suddenly no longer understood where he was. And it seemed to him when he again began to move that the barely perceptible echo of his steps reached his ears before his own foot managed to step down onto the concrete floor. His heart began to beat more acutely, but in an instant he was able to convince himself that paying attention to every rustle in the tunnels was silly and served no purpose. For some time, Artyom tried not to listen to the echo at all. Then, when it seemed to him that the most recent of the fading echoes were drawing closer, he covered his ears and continued to move forward. But even this didn't work for long.